This is it.
Hey.
We are excited to talk to Michelle Oravitz today. She speaks our language. She's an L.A.C. and fellow of FABORM, which is, I'm one of these fellows. What is it? Tell me more.
So,
Is it the American
unfortunately,
Board?
I remember the old term, but they changed it because they wanted to make it, to not use Oriental medicine in there. So,
We'll say it's the American Board. It's a very hard test to pass of
yes, reproductive
reproductive medicine for traditional Chinese practitioners, and that is your specialty. And so she's an acupuncturist. She specializes in fertility. She found her love in Chinese medicine after it helped her through her own menstrual cycle challenges, and this inspired her to change her career from architecture to acupuncture. Interesting. Michelle is the host of a top-rated podcast called the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. She's been endorsed by best-selling authors such as Aimee Raupp, Jessica Ortner, and Dr. Lisa Miller. Michelle's been on a mission to help women get pregnant and be healthier ever since. Really, this is like the way of your life. And so I want to say that the way of fertility is your book. That's what we're here to talk about. So, Michelle, why did you write the book?
So, great question. So, just like anything, when you do something for a long time, you start to find yourself repeating the same thing. And then also, you start to pay attention to certain things within your patients and what you feel like they need. And then also my love for like the basis of Chinese medicine, really the root, which is Taoism and what that can teach us and how that simplicity and a lot of what the ancients have taught us for so long, it's like gold, it's gold. And I feel like in a lot of ways, modern day times, we're so focused and distracted on like what's outside, the outside noise. And a lot of what the ancients used to tell us is go within, like everything's within. And I've been a big fan of Joe Dispenza. I'm really into like, connecting with this innate intelligence that we all have. And when we get to that place, we're able to really connect with like an intelligence that can reorganize and reharmonize our bodies and our minds. And so I see a lot of people in the fertility journey suffering. And that one of the first things that I want to do as a practitioner is take that away from them or to ease it so that they can feel better, because from a place of feeling better, you're able to make better decisions. Also, when you are faced with ART options or IVF, like the right doctor, the right treatment protocol. So I think in so many ways it can benefit. And the fertility journey, as just by nature, is so draining. And there's just so much overload of information that a lot of times, even if you start out being like the most centered person, like we look at Lauren Hanna, for example, who I love, and I actually share her story in the book because it was so inspiring. But even somebody who came in knowing all the things and was a yoga practitioner and like knew what to do and has meditated in the past, even she tells her story about how she kind of, through the process, it took her away from herself. And then she at one point realized, after years of struggling, let me go back to myself. I need to come back to myself. It was like a calling. And she recognized it because she's had it before. She's done it before. And that's what she did. And for her, that was what got her to have a baby at 46 naturally. So, stories like that I share in the book. Stories of hope, like real life stories, people that have been on the podcast, I'll share their stories, and just stories like that, because I think when you hear those stories, it makes you feel, and it's not just stories of people like just conceiving. This is stories of people going through years of struggle that eventually found a way to conceive. So hearing that, I think when you know that there's an example out there or a story out there, it can make you feel like, oh, there's hope for me and I can do it. And I think hope is it's just such an important ingredient in this whole journey, because hope means like you believe in something before you actually see it.
Yes, and if you think about sort of where we are when we're struggling with fertility, it's like this innate need, right? You want that baby. And it's sort of like Lauren Hannah's story. It's sort of the same story as I had, where it was the fear. It was just such fear. So I, ran in and did IVF, and then I don't think I ever needed to do it, because then my second child just came naturally so easily. So it's this, women get in this spot where we make decisions that aren't necessarily us, right? It's
100%.
when I did IVF, I was in my naturopathic medicine residency. I didn't tell anyone. It was like a super secret.
Mm-hmm.
My husband knew.
And then you're
My
going through
family
that
knew.
alone, and that's hard
Yeah,
too,
no, because I was so embarrassed. I was like, I can't believe I can't do this like myself, So we struggle with all these things, but I love that story of Lauren's, because it is, she's a yogi and she knows how to eat and she lives a great life and she's a happy person, and she's even in a female rock band, which is true. But in your
I love
book,
that.
you talk about, it's so funny, right? The Way of Fertility, it's awaken your reproductive potential through the transformation power of ancient wisdom. So let's get into the ancient wisdom piece. What do you feel like you see, and it probably drove you to write this book, that is just lost? The things that we know from your study of Chinese medicine that have been lost and we need to bring back to women.
100%. I'll tell you, the first thing is just technology has taken over, and we are just looking at screens all day long. We don't spend time outside. We don't listen to the birds. We don't walk on the ground with bare feet, which has been shown now. It's studied. I mean, people have been saying this for years, and even Native Americans talk about it, and how people can get sick because they don't put their feet on the ground. But now science is catching up, and science is showing, yes, it is in fact very important. It is something that we need, and our bodies actually need it just as much as it needs sunlight. So, and it lowers inflammation. So things like that, really connecting with the earth, getting into our synchronistic patterns that are in line with nature, because nature is it's such a strong force that it's very hard to take nature out of track, because it just automatically will always come back to itself. You see, even cement, trees are going to grow through them. Those roots will come out of them. They're very strong. So whenever we want to get back in sync, we go into nature. Nature is one of the things. So that was one of the things. The fact that we're so disconnected, the fact that we are in a culture, and I blame advertising for it, where we want quick fixes, and advertising constantly feeds on that. You're going to get this quick, immediate, like whatever, a quick fix, a quick impact, and you're not going to have to wait long for it. And that is just not the rhythm of nature. So we're weakening certain muscles, I think, in ourselves and our minds over time, because we're just not using our proper, like what we're meant to have, which is connecting, being present, not thinking about the future, and not always running after things in order to gain. Sometimes it's about sitting still, being and receiving. And I find that a lot in the fertility world. And I even myself, I call myself a recovering New Yorker, because in New York, it was like I had to go, and my reproductive health was suffering. And I think to myself, like, after I finally learned to start meditating, to start going within, it was like my reproductive health was like going in a better rhythm. It was responding. And the fact that, which I think that science is amazing, but there's definitely something that's been lost, that if we can't measure it, it doesn't exist. Sometimes anecdotes are just as important. Throughout history, we didn't have microscopes to study. Weren't able to dissect everything, but they still knew things about life just based on their own intuition and observation of nature. And so really like knowing ourselves, knowing our power, and knowing that our minds actually do impact our bodies, and what we think, how we speak, how we feel, even the words that we speak, our ears are listening. Sometimes even saying limited beliefs about ourselves, is it really based in truth? And the ancients always talked about going within, listening to yourself, and also questioning your thoughts, and not identifying with the thoughts, because they come and go. So they're passerbys, they're not something that's based in absolute truth. And the absolute truth is something that we can have or connect with when we're really connected to our own essence and our being. So, so those kind of things, and really connecting with that intuition, that intelligence that lies within us, but we are too distracted by outside noise to connect with.
I have a question, Hillary, but I want you to do it too.
I would love to know, when you're working with women and you're seeing them in your practice, or what is one of the first things that you do to try to help inspire some of these changes? Or what I love about the actual acupuncture is they can feel a change, they can feel, but not everybody has access that's listening to an acupuncturist or gets acupuncture. So what would be one of the first practices that you start with women that you're working with or that you're talking about in the book?
Well, I mean, in the book, I'll tell you what I suggest because I'm not like actively with them. But when I do work with people, one of the first things I do is listen. And sometimes just allowing people to be heard, you know, and I talk about that in the book, is really just expressing yourself, being able to release those emotions uninhibited, like no judgment, no, you know, like complete validation of self, because emotions want to move. You know, so that's one of the things, is just like allowing yourself to feel the feelings, because what happens is we start to feel shame about like, and I'm not into like be positive all the time. I'm not into like stop yourself from feeling the feelings. I'm not into that at all. Actually, it's like, it's about feeling the feelings and validating where you're at. And eventually, over time, once you allow that, and that works with acupuncture, it's that stagnation of chi that can occur by holding our own emotions inside and not allowing ourselves to fully process them. Emotions are just like food. They need to be digested. They need to be processed. And so part of that is speaking to people that you feel safe with, that you feel aren't going to judge you, and sometimes creating boundaries around people that you feel are going to judge you. It's important to do when you're in a state that's very vulnerable. Other times you might be able to handle it fine. But sometimes when you know that you're not in a state where you're feeling strong, then you got to create those extra reinforcements and boundaries. So those kind of things, just to kind of love yourself and self-care, love yourself enough to allow yourself to express yourself in your entirety. Without hurting people. You know, that's always kind of like the one rule, you know, just without hurting people, you could still express yourself. I think that's that balance. And so, so that's always the first thing, is just really meeting yourself where you're at, fully.
I love that you're talking about boundary creation, because it's something that is so important for your self health. We find that women take on a lot of extra tasks. We're natural helpers, caretakers, you know, and sometimes there are things that just exhaust you. You know, there's the meeting or the board you're on or the responsibility that just drains you, right? And that's not good for fertility or hormone health. So the boundary thing is really interesting. I feel like culturally, you know, and you see this with girls in school, right? Girls are supposedly easier in school because they sit and they listen, and you know, that's kind of like a thing. But saying what you need and being firm about it and being able to be in that uncomfortable zone is something that's like a learned skill.
It is.
And so I really love that. So how would you try to help someone to set boundaries and actually, you know, it's those relationships that are so important for our health and the way we speak to ourselves and the way we conduct ourselves. So how would you help someone there?
So it's practice. It's a practice, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to always feel comfortable doing. But ask yourself, is what this person, you know, sometimes you sacrifice for people and it's fine, but sometimes you sacrifice for people and you know you're actually helping them. And then sometimes you sacrifice, or people want you to sacrifice, and they're not getting help. They're just giving you a hard time. I mean, honestly, like that sometimes happens. If you know that it's that type of relationship, because it's okay to put effort sometimes when you know it's going somewhere. But if it is starting to come at your own expense, that is when you have to just say no. You just have to say no. It's uncomfortable, but you know, saying no in that case is actually saying yes to yourself.
Yes, that's such good advice. And so I guess it's the acceptance that this might be an uncomfortable conversation and it might be messy, but you just reaffirm, right? You just say, this is how it has to be, and this is why for me. And,
Or you sometimes don't even have to explain yourself and get into a whole conversation. Sometimes it could just be like, I'm sorry, I have other things going on right now. Because that also is draining. And if you're not ready to do that, you don't have to do that. Like you could just say, hey, I'm not able to, sorry. End of story. If they ask, I'm not, you could say, I don't want to talk about why. You don't have to explain yourself. You could just say no.
Right. You can say no. I mean, for someone you're in relationship with, sometimes it's that
This
sort
is
of
true.
holding the line, because it's going to be a bit of a discussion.
This
But
is
that's-
true.
that's
This is
where
true.
we
It depends on the relationship.
like, I don't know. I was taught to cave to just make it easy and like, just sort of like as easy as you can be, whatever. But actually you just need to be like, nope, nope, nope. And just repeat it and be okay in the uncomfortable, because ultimately it's better for you. I love setting boundaries is a good thing for people. But I wanted to ask go back to Taoism, because this book really is about the basic ancient wisdom. And so can you explain a little bit more about Taoism and how it informs you and how you think about people these days?
Yeah, so Taoism really is the root of Chinese medicine, and the actual interpretation means the way. And if you look at the symbol, like the major symbol of Chinese medicine, it is the yin and the yang. And the way is always the way of harmony. And you will see the way and you will always see harmony reflected in nature, because that is the core. And this is why, after thousands of years, Chinese medicine never goes out of style. It's always relevant because it's based on something that is always happening, which is really like at the core of how nature works and how nature thrives. And it will always thrive when it's in balance and when it has harmony. So it's this kind of effortless efforting that we have. It's kind of like this back and forth. Yes, you have effort, but effort's going somewhere. And then you also have the receptivity, and you have the both, working together. I'd like to give the example, I mentioned it in the book, about the birds. So the bird's flying. So the bird takes off and uses a ton of energy with its wings, and it's flying and flying and flying. And then there's a certain point where it meets the wind. And at that point, if it flew, it probably wouldn't do so well, very high. So it actually allows, it spreads its wings and allows the wind to fly it. And it just kind of, there's that combination of knowing when to put the effort in and then knowing when to surrender. So it's this effortless effort. And they call it Wu Wei. It's a concept in Taoism. And it's this flow. And Chinese medicine, a lot of what we do, like the acupuncture, really is meant to create flow and harmony. And it's not us healing the body. We're actually just creating an environment for the body to be in such balance that it's able to heal itself. Yes. And so basically homeostasis, if you want to call it, like in conventional medicine, but we know that that is necessary for life.
Yeah, that's and sort of we think about the medicine, the traditional Chinese medicine that we've all studied is that people observed nature, like you just said. I'm picturing, sitting in lotus pose and just watching the birds, and that's how this came. That's Taoism, right? That's how this came. Like that's the nature of it. And for fertility, it's interesting because many people have struggled and done this treatment and that treatment and nothing's working, and I keep having miscarriages and I'm struggling and now I don't trust my body, and all of these things we hear, and they're real serious issues. And often people just go back to the basics. And they're like, I'm done with this. I'm going to enjoy my life. And that's the story of Lauren too, that story. And I love that idea that you can release yourself of all these rules and all this rigid approach to your health. And so can you speak to that a little bit?
100% I could speak to that. So that's basically, you just described being in the yang, like 24/7. And if you're in the yang 24/7, you cannot have balance. It's just the reality of it. It's just kind of like the solid truth. So this is what happened with Lauren. She went from being in the yang constantly, and then she went back to the yin, where she was receptive. She was listening to herself. She was able to have conversations with her spirit baby. Like she could hear her talking. You can't hear if you're not listening. If you're not getting quiet, if it's too loud outside, you're not going to hear. So having the two, because I'm going to say that having too much, like doing a lot actually has its place. It's important to be able to do, but it's also important to be. So having that combination, that balance, not only is it better for your body, but it actually takes you away from that anguish and suffering. So it actually works on many different levels. And it feels like impossible when you're going through the journey. But when I do work with people, I do help them get to that state if they're willing, because obviously they have to be on board. If they're willing, I do help them on that path. And I do see them at a point where they have peace and they feel good before baby. And consequently, it does kind of tend to move in that direction, and then it helps fertility.
Yeah. I love when women and men in general on their fertility journey start to feel better, and because of all the different things that they're doing and self-care and taking care of themselves. Like, we have a lot of women in our community who are like, I just feel better. And what kills me is we've had patients before who've gone through, I did 3 rounds of IVF and I was exhausted the entire time during IVF. And we're like, wow, nobody stopped to address this woman's fatigue or her total underlying, like, just why is she fatigued? What's happening, right? And naturally, you're not going to have a positive outcome. So what's so beautiful about the fertility journey and having a spiritual practice on your fertility journey, because it's essentially what you're discussing, right? Like all the things that we weren't trained to do in our society. And we always, Kara and I say it to the patients that we work with, and it sounds so trite, but it's so true. Like, as you're increasing your vibration, or as you're becoming more of you on the journey, you're actually like really training yourself to be a better mother in a sense, or a more competent, like that the mothering will come easier. So it's like everything that you're learning on this journey, it actually helps you so much in the parenting.
Well, I always say you're mothering yourself first. That's one of the ways that you can actually help, like, your own fertility, is by mothering yourself.
It's that, I mean, it's so beautiful. And like, it is kind of the thing that we're not taught. And even we're all mothers of teenagers, I think. And it is amazing. Like, even knowing what I know, like, it's hard to imprint it on growing children in this society who are sort of like into the doing.
Oh yeah.
And into the achieving and and you just see it so strongly. In the girls, like, and it's like, whoa, okay, wait, you need to have time where you're not into the doing or the being or the this, and it does feel like it's this journey that we have to learn to come back to ourselves at some point.
Yeah.
And so it's more just that comment where I love it when women are saying, like, okay, I got my period again this month, but I'm not as devastated as I was. Like, I know it's just part of the practice, and like, at least I'm having a good period. And at least, so when your mindset's really changing and you're in this kind of flow, that if things that feel like a setback, it doesn't have to be this big trauma every month, because that's what you're trying to do, is get things just smooth and in the flow and in the positivity, so we're less traumatized by our daily living, essentially, right?
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, and then also, I mean, I do actually mention in the book a lot of research that's been done that kind of proves a lot of what Chinese medicine has been saying for thousands of years. Like, because I always say, like, the heart uterus connection is really important, and obviously, I call it the heart mind uterus, because it's not just the heart and the uterus. We know that the heart has an incredibly important role in housing the mind, and heart math, which is research that's coming out now, is proving that. We've been talking about it for thousands of years. It's not we, but like, the stuff that I've studied, but they've been talking about it for thousands of years, how the heart houses the mind and how your mindset impacts the heart energy. And so they're starting to see that there's this heart brain coherence, and they have a really important relationship. And when the heart is coherent, or heart and brain are coherent, it actually creates more feelings of peace and ease. And then with the heart uterus connection, I always compare it with like the one, I guess, measurement is oxytocin, because oxytocin is that one hormone that creates bonding. They call it the love hormone. And what they see is that it opens the uterus up during labor. But what is also interesting is that it increases around ovulation too. And it also increases around after orgasm. Why is that? You kind of wonder, okay, does it have a role on opening the uterus to receive and opening the uterus to let out? We know that in Chinese medicine, we're taught that heart uterus connection via the Bao Mai, it has an important role in opening the uterus. So, so then you see there was something, it was done on animals. It was, I don't remember which animal it was, but they actually looked at IUI. And with IUI, they took two groups, one group that didn't have any oxytocin and another group that they gave oxytocin. And the one that they gave oxytocin increased, because with IUI, you're not having that bonding connection.
Right.
Will increase it naturally. Maybe that's one of the things that they need to look into now, maybe increasing that around that time, because when they have it, increase the chances, the conception rates. So
that's so cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, oxytocin's a really interesting hormone, right? Like you cuddle up on the sofa and it just changes your whole stress hormone picture and all of your steroid hormones. Like it's a really interesting hormone, but Chinese medicine always made that link.
Yeah.
We're just coming back to that. Like that's some of the most amazing wisdom, is that they got the connection. Still now, I'm saying this as a real statement, still now some doctors dismiss the role of stress and high cortisol in actually getting pregnant, and how there's nothing to do there. But
is that true? Wow.
There is evidence that shows that it can impact it. And even if it's not directly, even if it's because it lowers progesterone, which is a really important hormone. Like, I mean, there's so many things that it shows. That how can you say that? Did you really look at the literature? That's my question.
No, it's totally dispelled, but you still hear doctors, my patients will come back and tell me that, it's interesting, but I love that Chinese medicine knew that. What you're talking about is so important, because it's that whole link of emotional well-being and being happy and feeling loved, and how that plays into fertility and hormone balance. It's a pretty incredible thing. I think we tried to, in the West, think, oh, it's the brain and the pituitary gland, and that's what regulates everything. But in Chinese medicine, they don't believe that. That's not their thing. It's like the heart regulates all that. So it's so interesting to just see.
But the heart's electromagnetic field is much larger than the brain's. And they know this. They can measure it now.
Even that statement's incredible.
Wait, Michelle, tell everybody how to get your book, because this would be such a resource for women on their fertility journey and in general.
Yeah, thank you. So they can go to my website, michelleoravitz.com/The Way of Fertility. They can find information about the book, but they can also get a chapter for free if they would like, or they can find a link to buy it directly on Amazon.
Beautiful.
We have a number of people saying it's just such a good book. And such
that read it.
Yeah, look at this.
Nicole.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. People love this book.
Nicole.
Another person saying this book can be such a great key for people wanting to conceive. And so thanks for writing the book and sharing all this with people. I hope it can change the way we're thinking about fertility, and how really working on yourself is the way, right? Working on yourself, going inside. Any last thoughts or things you want to mention?
Yeah, just getting into that state of love. They've, and I've seen this on Dr. Joe Dispenza, but there's been some research out on this. But Dr. Joe Dispenza, what I love about his retreats is that they have a whole research team, and they measure the brain, they measure the heart, they measure the blood, even the microbiome. So it's pretty wild. But what they found was that it's not just the thought that matters. That's why sometimes affirmations alone don't work. It's elevated emotions. When you elevate emotions and you think about things that you love, and I talk about this in the book, meditation, loving kindness, getting to the state of the heart, getting into love, into joy, thinking about the things that you love, even if it's a couple of things a day, just think about the things that you love, the things that you're really grateful for. That will automatically elevate your emotions, which will help you to be a more impactful like magnet for what you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fill your life with your passions and joy. You know, that's what it's there for.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. We hope to
Thank
get
you
to
for taking
chat
the time
again.
to do this.
Oh, it was a pleasure. I love you guys. And thank you so much for having me on. And it's always fun talking to you. And it was a great conversation.
Thanks for being here.
Bye.